Hello, Frizzle friendlies. I love reading fantasy romance, but it has to be the right fantasy romance. And thankfully, I found many authors whose fantasy romance that I do love, and we are going to be exploring some of those. Because one of my bad habits is that I will read a book and I will love it, and I will give it 5 stars, and then I will not pick up anything else from that author again because I'm scared that it'll let me down. So we are making this video to force myself to read fantasy romance books from authors that I have previously given 5 stars. And those authors today are Ilona Andrews, Olivia Atwater, and Allison Saft. So let's roll into the new books from them. First author of the video is Ilona Andrews. I've read a lot of books by them. I've read the whole Kate Daniels series, I've read the whole Hidden Legacy series, I've read a few other scattering novellas, and out of that whole handful, I've only given them 2 5 stars. So while I wouldn't say Ilona Andrews is one of my favorite authors, I would say that they have an incredible track record because I've never given them less than a 3-star either. Now, I selected On the Edge, a urban fantasy romance adventure, and I'm 30% into it right now. And it's not going too well. The basic plot is there are these people who live on the edge, between the magical world and the normal world, and they're in this little pocket dimension in between that has some magic and some technology. And a lot of the plot so far has been about this family that is living in poverty, where our protagonist is really struggling to make ends meet, struggling to take care of her little brothers, and then shows up this bossy, aristocratic man from the regions of the magical fairy world, kind of demanding to marry her because she has strong magic and he wants that for his bloodline. And then there's also a plot going on where there's all these demons hunting down people who live in their neighborhood, and you know, it's bad. And here's the thing, I'm not super connecting to the main character or her plight. I really don't like that this book doesn't have a single perspective, but it's not like the additional perspective that it's adding is the love interest. No, it's adding a lot of random people. It's adding her little brothers are a perspective for a chapter, and then someone else in the neighborhood's a perspective chapter, and then someone else in the neighborhood's a perspective in the chapter. And it just keeps jumping around to just random people and bystanders to try to tell this larger story about these like impending demon attacks, but I don't find it compelling, and I hate it when books keep switching perspective so quickly for like apparently no reason. I feel like if you have a perspective character, they need to be like a main character with an arc, not just to like give us information dumps about what's happening elsewhere. It feels so lazy to me. I have read many a book by Ilona Andrews with the male love interest who is bossy, alpha, aristocratic, snobby with a side of chivalry, and I've never loved those love interests from them. So 30% in, I'm not really loving anything about this book, and I'm definitely not loving the love interest. So I think we're going to DNF at 30%, which is not the way I want to start out this reading fantasy romances from authors I've given 5 stars before video, but On the Edge, I'm going to give 2 stars. DNF at 30%, woo! Now I've also started Half a Soul, and let me tell you about that one because it's going so much better. I am 40% into Half a Soul. The plotline of this one is we are following a lady, and when she was younger, she got half her soul stolen by an evil fairy, and this means that she cannot feel fast emotions, and it leads to her not really feeling embarrassed or shocked, and that means that she's often causing scandals, and it's very important that she's causing scandals because it's a very Regency England type setting where scandal is the big problem. Because she and her cousin are out in going to London balls trying to find husbands. And along the way, our wonderful protagonist has met the Lord Sorcier, who is an incredibly rude man who's always insulting people. But because our leading lady cannot feel embarrassment or shock, she's scared away like everyone else. And so she's like the only one that this guy hasn't managed to offend. And through that, they're starting to strike up like this friendship relationship, especially as they bond over this magical plague that's going around hurting children. He cares about the children, she cares about the children, they're bonding, they're bantering. And yes, his banter is incredibly insulting and abrasive, but our leading lady, she can give it right back. And I love their relationship. I love how this book holds back just a little bit on him being really rude, where he's rude enough that it's plausible that he's offended and frightened away every other person. But he's never so rude that it takes him out of the viable and interesting love interest camp. You know, like he'll insult you, but he'll still respect you as a person. I think it's the distinction there. And one of the other things that Half a Soul is nailing is the Regency England vibes. Like, yes, it's played for a little bit more fun, it's kind of campy, but also the social restrictions and patterns of the time are very much in force. It's getting the vibes just right. And adding in fairies and magic, which is so fun. I'm loving Half a Soul here at 40%. If I was giving a predicted rating right now, optimistically, I'd say 5 stars. So I finished Half a Soul and it was so cute. All the characters were so fun. I have no major complaints, but I loved how, you know how throughout the entire book, we've been going through this thing where our protagonist, she's lost half of her soul and it's messed up her emotional range. And then at the end of the book, there's all these opportunities for her to potentially fix her emotions, to be able to mend her soul in various ways and to pursue that. But she has to make decisions. Do I pursue that or do I pursue other important things like this magical plague? And she ends up choosing repeatedly to pursue healing the magical plague instead of her own interests. Feels like a lot of the message about the book is like, it's okay that she's a little different because this is her and her love interest still loves her for her and she still loves herself. And I very much treasure that that was the way that the book went. This wasn't a problem to be solved despite some characters thinking that it was at the beginning of the book, but just a part of her life and personality and who she wanted to be. And while this book definitely captured my heart with enough 5-star energy, I don't think it quite captured enough of my brain enough to be 5-star energy. So in the end, we're going to give Half a Soul 4 stars and I'm very excited to read more from this author. And I have started A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft. Here's my star distribution of Allison Saft books so far. 4-star, 5-star. I'm going into this book excited, especially because the last 2 books I read from this author were fantasy romances and I love both fantasy and the romance, especially the romance. It was done so well for both the books. So how are we going on A Fragile Enchantment? And the answer's not well. I'm 50% in and I'm considering giving up on it. We are following a woman named 𝐂𝐿𝐒. I don't know how to say her name. And she is a dressmaker. She makes exquisite ball gowns and she also has magic that she embroiders into the gowns to make the wearers even more beautiful or even more intimidating or whatever she wants. She has been hired to do the clothes for a royal wedding coming up. And this is another book set in Regency England location. And after reading Half a Soul and then jumping into Fragile Enchantment, it's so stark how much better Half a Soul did Regency England-ish setting than this book. This book, it doesn't claim to actually be in England. It's renamed the countries, but it's very obviously Regency England coded. They call it Avaland, and it is in fact in a Regency period that very closely mirrors historical Regency England. So 𝐂𝐿𝐒 is from a country that is like Ireland, went through the Blight a few decades ago, and everything is not quite back on its feet. Things are going poorly. So she is ecstatic that she gets this economic opportunity to go be the dressmaker for this royal wedding because now this is the way to start a big business, to get new clients, to get a lot of money. She's very excited. And then when she gets there, she is of course working hand in hand with the prince who's getting married to design all the clothes, and they start up a chemistry and attraction. But also while they're there, Irish workforce in England is slowly setting up labor revolts and unionizing because they're being mistreated, and that's a big part of the plot here. Though I definitely want the Irish workers to win all of this unionizing and protests and stuff that they're doing, it's not entertaining. Like, I'm on their side. I'm rooting for them. It's so boring. They're just kind of like there in the background, sometimes complaining, and nothing's really happened with it. Like, there's been protests in the background. Servants have been quitting in the background. But like, nothing in the plot has actually happened because of it. There hasn't been any real impacts on our protagonist and her journey because of all of this politics stuff. So the book is spending so much page time talking about all this politics stuff and that it's not actually impacting the plot, and therefore I don't care about it. It's boring. It's dragging the page count. I'm 50% into this book. I don't like it. Additionally, the romance, not shipping it, not feeling it. The prince, who is our love interest, is very much like, this is the sad boy. He used to be an alcoholic, but he's recovering. He's got a bunch of daddy issues. He's got a bunch of mommy issues. He can't connect with his older brother. He has trouble making friends, right? They're presenting the sad boy. But then I'm not really like enjoying him as a character because he's just sad boy. He's just depressing. He's not really being active and doing anything in the plot. And after reading Half a Soul, which did the Regency England vibes so well, this book, it's failing. In this book, all of the manners and the culture things that you would associate with the Regency England setting are just like non-existent. There's people calling strangers, people that they're courting, by their first names left and right. There's people using modern language left and right. People being like, yeah, that's what I thought too. Wow, she has the balls, you know? And I'm like, what? what is going on? And all of these little decisions, it's not like I'm demanding period accuracy in my fantasy romance books, but if you're trying to cash in on the vibe of the Regency period, and then you don't put in any work to set up the feeling of the Regency period, then everything just falls flat. It almost feels like the author just asked herself, hey, what's a popular time period? The Regency? Yeah, we'll set it in Regency, but didn't actually have any love for this period of time or the vibes that it evokes. One of my other complaints about this book is the way it feels very checkboxy in its representation of queerness. So the book goes out of its way to establish that our main character, 𝐵𝐻𝐻, is like a lesbian. She outright states a few times in the book that she's only interested in girls romantically. It also goes out of its way to state that the prince, her love interest, is like gay. Like he literally states that like he only likes guys. And then here they are in the pages crushing on each other, admiring each other's bodies, like full out crush. And we don't see 𝐵𝐻𝐻 in the book admiring any women or anything. It's like all of her actions is very straight, and then her self-identification in the book is not. And it just feels like the author is like trying to have her cake and eat it too. Like it's a straight romance, and then we're throwing in extra identities that aren't actually represented in the text at all. Like if you want your character to be bi, let them be bi. But that's not what this book is doing. This book is outright saying like she's only interested in women, and then ooh, look at that prince, he's so hot, I can't stop thinking about him. I wonder what it would be like to kiss him. It's like, girl, what? So yeah, 50% into A Fragile Enchantment, and I'm just straight up not having a good time. Projected rating for this book is 2 stars. I think I'm gonna DNF it pretty soon. You know, I think I'm gonna skip to like 80% in and see if it's better and read the end of the book maybe. I'll check in with you later. Now, I have finished A Fragile Enchantment. I decided to read the last 10% just to see what the ending was and if it got any better. It didn't. So DNF with the first 50% and last 10%. And you know what's like the worst part of all of this? Is that I went on Goodreads and I was looking at other people's reviews of this book, and like almost all of them are 5-star reviews. People are loving this book. Even the 4-star reviews are so passionate about it. They say how romantic and perfectly Regency vibes it is. And I'm like, did we even read the same book? Because this was not romantic and it did not have Regency vibes. Like this book, the book where everyone's always calling each other by their first names, and the book where people are totally casual about touching each other, and the book where people are saying yeah and slaying all the time, that's not Regency era vibes. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not. It's completely failed in that regard. And like, I never bought the romance. I never liked the love interest. I thought the execution of queer representation in this book was fundamentally flawed and weird. And most of all, the greatest flaw, this book is just so boring. So I'm going to give A Fragile Enchantment 2 stars. It did earn a whole star because it was just not boring enough to make me read entirely 50%. I swear, fantasy romance is typically a genre that hits pretty well for me. Here's my stats distribution of a lot of the fantasy romance recently that I've read. As you can see, I do give out quite a few 5 stars. It's just not so far in this video, but I'm hoping for more in the future. And if you have fantasy romance recommendations for me, please drop them in the comments. I am looking for that next 5-star. If you enjoyed this video, you'll love watching this one about sci-fi romance books next.